Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning into the Baltimore Broadcasting Company special presentation of this year's Year in Review. 1968 is ending, and it's time to wrap up this year's events. This year was quite hectic and full of events to talk about, and we have plenty for you today. With that being said, let's now throw it over to our political analyst, Lorenzo Howard.
Good evening. My name is Lorenzo Howard. I'll be your political correspondent today. The Apollo 8 space crew was the first crewed mission to leave orbit and go to the moon and safely return. On Christmas Eve, they snapped great pictures of the Earth and sent them home. The astronauts of the Apollo 8 space crew were wishing the American populace Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. In grimmer news, the North Vietnam started the Tet Offensive early this year, a brutal and costly offensive against the American soldiers overseas. The American people are calling for an end to the war and bring our boys back home. Not just Americans are calling for the end of the war, but also our ally, the UK, are having massive violent protests about our, that thing. Anyways, President Johnson's approval ratings are at an all-time low. More than 500,000 troops are stationed, and we have lost 30,000 troops so far. Johnson's mastery of Congress is being called into question. That is it for the Vietnam update. And sad news, on April 4th of this year, a Thursday at 6:05, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot while standing on the balcony outside his second-floor room at the Lorraine Motel. One shot was heard coming from a nearby location. King was rushed to the hospital and died an hour later. President Johnson called for a day of mourning on April 7th for that. Robert F. Kennedy also talks about MLK's assassination while saying these words: Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and justice in his fellow human beings, and he died because of that effort. Robert F. Kennedy was later assassinated in June by taking multiple gunshots coming out of a building. But Dr. King's death is felt all around the country, and we request a moment of silence for Martin Luther King. Alright, well that wraps up this year's political events. Now it's time to throw it over to our sportsman, Philip.
In sports news this year, the Detroit Tigers bested the St. Louis Cardinals in the 1968 World Series, winning Game 7 to take home the hardware. Something tells me those Mets have a real chance at it next year with that Tom Seaver kid. Bob Gibson continues his dominance on the mound, taking home his first MVP award and his second Cy Young award. The Baltimore Orioles win a 91-71, good enough for second place in the division, but unfortunately not enough to win the pennant. Brooks Robinson performed well for the Orioles, sporting a .253 batting average with 17 home runs and 75 RBIs. Football news, the second ever Super Bowl between the AFL's Green Bay Packers and the NFL's Oakland Raiders was played. Oakland took the trophy home yet again to the NFL. But this year, it looks like the Packers may just have a good chance to take the trophy to the AFL this upcoming Super Bowl. Quarterback Earl Morrall took home the MVP trophy this year. Your Baltimore Colts performed extremely well this year, sporting a record of 13 wins and 1 loss, which was good enough to win the Coastal Division and punch a ticket to the playoffs. Unfortunately, they were not able to make it to the Super Bowl. Now over to our economics expert, Lucas Buns.
Welcome back to BBC News. I'm your economics analyst, Lucas Buns. 200,000 jobs were created in America, with the employment rate being down by 0.4% this year. The American government is in $2 billion of debt from our failed war effort in Vietnam. Large American companies are rising in power, such as Exxon, a $20 million company, and General Motors, a $13 million company. U.S. Steel has become a major product, gaining a profit of $175.2 million. You may have realized that your money in your pocket has become larger because earnings have gained 8% this year. The California gold rush has made many countries lose faith in the American dollar. This has caused inflation to rise by 4.19%. The Poor People's Campaign, even at the unfortunate death of its creator, Mr. King, continues to march onward in justice for the impoverished, regardless of their race. Now back to our sportsmen to wrap up this year's news. Action!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the BBC. In other sports news, In the NBA, 2 teams were added to the league. The Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns have joined the league. While they have not gotten off to a great start, I'm sure their futures are bright. Will Chamberlain continues to dominate the league even after joining his new team, the LA Lakers. Will had demanded a trade just 2 days after the Kings' assassination. He took home the MVP trophy yet again, and him and his new team are bound for yet another championship trophy. In the NHL news this year, the NHL doubled its size, adding 6 new teams to the league this year. In this new West Division, the very new Philadelphia Flyers led the division, but was eventually bested by the Montreal Canadiens in the Stanley Cup Finals. Chicago Blackhawks' Dan Mikito took home the MVP award this year, and it was his first of career. I'll now throw it over to our wonderful Jaden Johnson for our coverage on societal impacts of this year.
Who hired this? Anyway, good morning, good evening. My name is Jaden Johnson, and welcome back to the BBC once more. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Fair Housing Bill, also known as the Civil Rights Act, into law this year. This law prohibits discrimination concerning the sale, rental, or financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, and sex. The creation of the Anti-Riot Act has also made it illegal to incite or encourage riots. This act was brought with controversy due to its potentially limiting the First Amendment rights of freedom of speech. The Michigan murders are still ongoing from 1976. Young women from ages 13 to 21 were abducted, raped, and murdered. What world we live in? Okay. In other news, a new killer called the Zodiac Killer has murdered 5 victims and threatened for worse destruction in the future. This murderer will be caught soon by the police, as we shall see the face of this unknown villain soon. Do we have a leak in the building? All right. Our last piece of information for society in 1968, the Bilingual Education Act was passed the 2nd of this year, in January. That makes sense. This act provided federal grants to school districts in order to create educational programs for children with limited English speaking ability, probably like me too. It's my first day on the job. Now we will throw it over to our beautiful field reporter, Philip Healy, for an exclusive interview.
I'm here at Jobbatown High School, our filming studio for the BBC. I'm here with our wonderful drummer here, Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker, how would you say your life in the 1968 was?
Spare change.
At the time.
I like to drum, and I get paid for drumming, and that's all right with me.
How did this affect your 1968 year, specifically economically? How did you feel?
Well, as a gigging drummer, obviously any economic downturn can affect people's ability to pay for live entertainment, but I still made a killing this year.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I guess that wraps up this year's interview. This was very interesting. We need a new drummer, please. I have found a brand new person to interview. Sir. How do you feel about the political, social, and economical state of the America right now?
I think hamburgers and cheeseburgers work well with fries.
And that wraps up our this year's version of Year in Review, 1968.
On our next BBC edition, we will be trying to find our missing political analyst, Lorenzo Howard. Stay tuned.
So, ongoing investigation.
Jiggle, jiggle.
Can you remember any of the rap that you did?
My money don't jiggle, jiggle. It folds. I like to see you wiggle, wiggle. For sure. It makes me wanna